r/pettyrevenge. My parents picked golden child sister, so I exposed her. Hashtag the straw that broke me. The email notification popped up on my phone at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I remember the exact time because I checked it twice, thinking maybe I'd misread it. I hadn't. Asterisk dear Mr./Ms. Name, thank you for your FAFSA application. Unfortunately, without additional financial support from your parents or family members, you do not qualify for enough aid to cover your tuition costs for the 2024 to 2025 academic year. Asterisk. I sat on the edge of my bed in my tiny dorm room, reading that email 3 times, waiting for the crushing weight of it to fully sink in. I'd done everything right. 4.0 GPA in high school. 3.8 in my first year of college. Merit scholarships. Work-study job. I'd even taken out loans in my own name. But it still wasn't enough. I needed my parents to contribute just $8,000 for the year. Not for luxuries. For tuition. That's when I heard my mom's text notification buzz through our family group chat. Sweetie. Your father and I just wanted to surprise you. We're buying you that new car you wanted for Christmas. The pearl white Range Rover from the dealership downtown. We're so proud of you. The message had 3 emojis. A car. A heart. A champagne bottle. My sister is 17. She drives a 2015 Honda Civic that runs fine. She'd mentioned wanting a Range Rover once, as a joke, and apparently my parents had decided that was a life priority. I sat there in the dark of my dorm room, a room I was paying for myself, and felt something inside me snap like a branch under snow. Not dramatically. Just, cleanly. Completely. That's when I made the decision that would eventually blow everything up. I want to be clear about something before I go further. I wasn't always this person. I wasn't always the bitter older sibling plotting revenge. That took years of accumulated moments, tiny paper cuts of disappointment that eventually bled out into something I couldn't ignore anymore. My parents have always been selective about their attention. When I was 10 and placed second in a district science fair, my mom asked why I hadn't won first. When I got accepted to a prestigious summer program at 15, my dad was too busy to drive me to the enrollment meeting, so I had to decline. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, with a speech and everything, my parents showed up late because they'd been at my sister's soccer game. Not even championship level. Just a regular game. But when my sister got AB+ in 7th grade English and worked so hard to bring it up, there was a family celebration. When she made the JV volleyball team as a freshman, we drove 2 hours to every single game. When she mentioned wanting to go to a state school that was basically her safety net academically, my parents immediately started talking about how they'd figure out the finances to make it happen. The golden child phenomenon. I'd read about it in psychology class. I'd never thought it would be my life. My sister, Emma, is genuinely nice. That's the part that makes this complicated. She's not a bitch about the favoritism. She doesn't rub it in my face. She's just golden. Effortlessly smart, effortlessly pretty, effortlessly the favorite. And my parents don't even seem to notice they're doing it. Or maybe they do, and they think it's fine because she's worth it somehow. But here's what I didn't know until I really started paying attention. Emma isn't actually effortless at all. She's just really good at performing effortlessness. It started small. Last spring, my mom mentioned that Emma was taking a heavy course load and might not have time to visit me at college. I texted Emma about it, just casually asking how her classes were going. Honestly, she'd written back. Dying. I have no idea how I'm passing calculus. I asked her if she wanted help. I'm good at math. I offered to FaceTime with her, to go over problems. She said no, that she didn't want to bother me, but also that she'd figure it out. When I saw her at winter break, I asked her about it. She'd been weird, kept changing the subject. That's when I noticed something was off with her whole demeanor. She seemed stressed in a way I'd never seen before. Not the performative stress of a golden child with too much on her plate, but actual anxiety. I didn't think much of it then. I was too wrapped up in my own stuff. But then came the car announcement, and I spiraled. And when you spiral, you start doing things you wouldn't normally do. Like noticing things. Like really paying attention. Emma had been vague about her grades all year. Every time my parents asked, she'd give some deflection like, yeah, pretty good, or change the subject entirely. That's not like her. Emma usually talks about school constantly. It's kind of her thing. So I did something I'm not proud of. I went through her Instagram more carefully. Her Snapchat stories. Her public social media footprint. I looked at the photos she'd been tagged in, the timestamps, the locations. And I found inconsistencies. So many inconsistencies. There were photos of her at parties I'd never heard her mention. Posts from friends celebrating, getting through midterms, on dates when Emma had claimed she was studying at home. Tagged locations at places 3 hours away when she was supposedly at mandatory school events. I sat with that information for a solid week, telling myself it was none of my business. She's 17. Maybe she's having a normal teenage experience. Maybe she deserves to have fun without my parents breathing down her neck about her grades. But then I remembered that email. That, unfortunately, from the financial aid office. That Range Rover emoji. And I remembered my mom's voice every time she gently, so gently, suggested that maybe college wasn't for everyone, that maybe I'd be happier, finding my own path, all while Emma's path was apparently paved with Range Rovers and unconditional parental support. That's when I started really looking. Not just at social media. At everything. It took 2 weeks, but I found them, the actual grade emails that Emma hadn't deleted from her trash folder. Screenshots of messages between her and friends talking about her absolute bomb of a GPA. Posted grades from the online student portal that I somehow managed to access. Don't ask me how, because I'm not going to explain that part. My perfect, golden, praised beyond measure sister was failing. Not spectacularly, but consistently. 3DS and AF in her most recent semester. A student on academic probation who her parents believed was thriving. And me? The one whose achievements never seemed to matter. I was drowning. That's when the petty revenge part started forming. Not revenge on Emma. Never on Emma, really. Revenge on the system that had decided she was worth investing in, and I wasn't. The family holiday gathering was in 6 weeks. Hashtag the rabbit hole. I told myself I was just gathering information. That's what I called it in my head, * information gathering star. Not snooping. Not obsessing. Just understanding the full picture before I made any decisions. That's bullshit, obviously. I was obsessing. I created a new email account. I know how that sounds. I'm not proud of it. But I needed to see her student portal without raising flags, and once I realized I could access it using her basic information any family member might know, I couldn't stop myself. It was like picking at a scab. You know it's going to hurt and leave a scar, but your fingers won't listen to reason. The grades were worse than I'd initially thought. Fall semester, C-D, D+, F. Spring semester, C, D-F, D. The Fs were particularly brutal, one in Intro to Biology, one in Economics. Classes that should have been easy for someone with her supposed intellect. Classes that she definitely bragged about taking. But here's the thing that really got me, her parents had no idea. Not a clue. She was receiving these grades, and they were just happening in a void. My parents weren't checking in. They weren't asking for transcripts. They were buying her a Range Rover based on an imaginary version of their daughter who existed only in their own minds. I started a spreadsheet. I know how that sounds too. Like I was some kind of psychopath cataloging her failures. But I needed to organize it. I needed to make sense of the disconnect between the Emma my parents believed in and the Emma who was actually failing her classes. By the time mid-April rolled around, I had screenshots of her grades, dates and locations of parties from tagged social media posts, text conversations between her and a friend named Keegan, which I found by logging into her Instagram and reading her DMs, another thing I'm not proud of, discussing how she was gonna get destroyed on her bio exam. Photos from various parties, some from accounts that had since been deleted but that I'd managed to save. A complete academic history showing a downward spiral that started exactly when she entered her junior year of high school. What I didn't have was context. Motivation. Understanding. That should have been my cue to stop. To realize that I was becoming the kind of person who spent hours digging through their siblings' private life, building a case like I was a prosecutor preparing for trial. But I was angry. Angrier than I'd ever been in my life. The thing about being the overlooked child is that you spend years trying to understand what's wrong with you. Why your achievements don't land the same way. Why praise feels obligatory when it comes, if it comes at all. You internalize it. You think maybe you're just not as special. Maybe you're not as deserving. Maybe there's something fundamentally less than about you that your parents can sense, the way animals can sense fear. And then you find out that the golden child isn't actually golden. She's just better at maintaining the illusion. I was at work when it really hit me, when I realized what I was actually planning to do. I work at the campus coffee shop, one of those places where you make minimum wage and memorize drink orders for college students who are usually too busy looking at their phones to make eye contact. It's soul-crushing in a very specific way, but it pays for my textbooks and my share of the dorm room I don't actually have funding for anymore. My coworker Jasmine was making some elaborate cold brew monstrosity when she asked me why I looked like I'd swallowed a lemon. Just family stuff, I said, which was technically true. She nodded like she understood, but then she said something that actually made me pause. My mom always tells me that living well is the best revenge. Like, the goal is to become so successful and happy that you don't even think about the people who doubted you anymore. I remember thinking that was deeply naive. What if the people who doubted you are the ones paying your tuition? I asked. She made a face. Yeah, okay, that's a different situation. It is. That's the thing nobody tells you about family dysfunction. When you're financially dependent on the people screwing you over, there's no clean exit. No way to just walk away and build a better life somewhere else. You're trapped in a system that was rigged against you from the beginning, and the only exit strategy involves blowing the whole thing up. After my shift, I went back to my dorm and opened my laptop. I sat there for probably 20 minutes just staring at the folder I'd created, evidence. So clinical. So damning. I could send it to my parents right now. Anonymously, even. Just forward all the screenshots, all the documentation, all the proof that their golden child was a fraud, and watch the fallout. But that wasn't the plan I'd started forming. That wasn't the thing that would actually make them understand. No, my plan was worse. It was better. It was the kind of plan that would force them to see me, whether they wanted to or not. My dad has this thing he does at every family gathering. He makes this speech. It's usually after dinner, after a few drinks, when he's feeling sentimental. He talks about his kids and his pride in our accomplishments. He usually keeps it brief with me, something generic like, "We're so proud of how hard you work," before moving on to gush about Emma for like 10 minutes. This year's gathering was scheduled for December 22nd. A Saturday. Right before Christmas, when everyone would be there. When everyone would be in that specific headspace where family dynamics matter, where parental approval feels like it means something. I was going to ruin it. Not violently. Not with screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. I was going to do it the way that would hurt the most. I was going to force my parents to confront the reality of who their children actually were, and I was going to do it in front of the entire family, at their own table, during their own sentimental moment. I was going to bring evidence to Christmas dinner. The plan formed fully in my head sometime around 2 a.m. on a Thursday, when I should have been studying for my biology midterm. Instead, I was designing a printed presentation. Color-coded. Easy to read. The kind of thing you could hand to someone and watch their face as they realized their entire understanding of their child was wrong. I printed out exactly one copy. I locked it in my desk drawer. I didn't tell anyone. And I spent the next 8 weeks watching my sister live her lie while everyone in our family celebrated her for it. Every family video call, I watched my mom ask about Emma's classes with this tone of casual pride, like she already knew the answer would be impressive. Every time my dad mentioned Emma's future prospects with the kind of confidence he'd never extended to me, I smiled and nodded and added another detail to the folder. By October, I had enough evidence to floor them. By November, I was starting to have doubts. By December, I was past the point of stopping. Hashtag chunk 3. The thing about planning revenge is that it doesn't feel like planning revenge while you're doing it. It feels like justice. It feels like correcting a wrong that's been festering for years. It feels righteous and necessary and, most importantly, inevitable. Right up until the moment it stops feeling that way. That moment came on a Tuesday in November, 3 weeks before the December 22nd gathering. I was home for Thanksgiving break, which was its own special kind of torture. My parents' house has this weird energy during the holidays, this forced cheerfulness that makes everything feel more fragile and more hostile at the same time. Emma was there, home from her university where she was definitely, absolutely failing her classes in ways my parents had no idea about. She floated through the house in that way golden children do, comfortable in the assumption that everything would work out because it always had. My mom made her famous turkey. My dad made his terrible jokes. Emma complained that she gained 5 pounds at school and my mom immediately offered to buy her a gym membership. No one mentioned my tuition again. It was like that conversation had never happened, like my existence during that particular crisis had already been filed away as irrelevant. I was sitting in the kitchen on Wednesday morning, drinking coffee and pretending to read while actually watching Emma make herself breakfast, when something shifted. She was standing at the counter, scrolling through her phone while waiting for toast to pop, and she just looked tired. Not in the glamorous, I have so much going on way that everyone found endearing. But genuinely exhausted. The kind of tired that comes from maintaining an impossible version of yourself. For the first time since I'd started digging through her private life, I wondered what that felt like. My mom came in, already in work mode even though it was a holiday week, and asked Emma about her classes. And Emma did this thing, this automatic thing where her face reorganized itself into confidence. Killing it, she said. Bio is brutal but I'm managing. She wasn't managing. She was getting a D and probably going to fail the final. That's my girl, my mom said, and kissed the top of her head. I felt something crack open in my chest. Not guilt, exactly. But something adjacent to it. Some recognition that I'd been so focused on what Emma's lies had stolen from me that I hadn't considered what maintaining those lies was costing her. That thought was dangerous. I couldn't afford that thought. After Thanksgiving, things got weird with my friends. Or maybe I'd been weird with my friends and I was only just noticing. My roommate Sarah asked me if I was okay because apparently I'd been kind of intense lately. My best friend Marcus said I'd been bailing on hangouts, which was true, but when he asked why I just said I was stressed about finals. When he pressed for details, I changed the subject so aggressively that he dropped it. I was keeping the folder very, very secret, but I think people could sense that I was keeping something. Then, 2 weeks before the planned exposure, something happened that I absolutely wasn't prepared for. I was working the afternoon shift at the coffee shop, and Emma came in. She'd never come in before. I didn't think she even knew where I worked. But there she was, looking around the shop with that slightly lost expression people get when they're in a familiar environment but not the one they belong in. She was dressed nicely, which was unusual for a Tuesday afternoon. She was also alone, which struck me as strange for reasons I couldn't quite articulate. She ordered a latte and then asked for me specifically. Are you my sibling's coworker? She asked the barista, pointing at me. I think I'm supposed to say hi to them. My stomach did something weird. A flip. A drop. A twist. I made her latte with shaking hands. We didn't talk while I was making it, just that awkward silence where you're aware that you're being watched. When I handed it to her, she smiled, and it was her real smile, not the performed one. The one that made her look younger and more fragile than I'd let myself see in months. Hey, she said. I know we don't really talk much. But I wanted to bring you coffee. You're always doing stuff for yourself, you know. Working, paying for your own things. It seemed cool. She paused. Also, Mom was being annoying about how you're not coming home for Christmas because of work, and I thought maybe you'd want a reason to feel better about it. I couldn't speak. Just stared at her. Anyway, she continued, in that way people do when they're uncomfortable. Hope your shift isn't too bad. Those look really busy. She gestured toward the line forming behind her, which was merciful because it gave me an escape from whatever this moment was. Thanks, I managed. For the coffee. She left, and I stood there holding her money, feeling like I'd just watched my entire plan develop a crack. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her face, about how she'd looked in the coffee shop. About the fact that she'd made an effort to do something nice for me, when I'd been building a presentation designed to humiliate her in front of our entire family. I opened my laptop. I went to the folder. I looked at all the evidence I'd collected, the grades, the screenshots, the proof of the disconnect. And then I did something that surprised me. I called my friend Marcus. Hey, I said when he picked up. Can we talk about something? Obviously, he said. You've been weird as hell for like 2 months. I didn't tell him everything. But I told him enough. I told him about the folder, about the plan, about what I was going to do at Christmas. I told him because I needed to hear it out loud, spoken to someone else, so I could understand what I'd actually become. There was a long silence on his end. So you're planning to publicly destroy your sister because your parents favor her, he finally said. Not to destroy her, I said. To make them see the truth. And what's the truth, exactly? Marcus asked. That she's a normal person who struggles in school. That she's not perfect. Yeah, that's a real bombshell. That's definitely worth blowing up your entire family over. You don't understand, I said. They gave her money. They wouldn't help me with tuition but they're buying her a car. I do understand, Marcus interrupted. Your parents suck. They play favorites. That's awful. But your plan doesn't fix that. It just spreads the awful around. It makes everyone miserable. I hung up after that. Not angrily. Just done with the conversation. But his words stayed with me. They were still there on December 20th, when I printed out a fresh copy of the presentation and looked at it under the harsh light of my desk lamp. Professional. Damning. Perfect. I locked it back in the drawer. 2 days until Christmas. 2 days until I either went through with this, or admitted that I'd spent the last 8 weeks becoming someone I didn't recognize, for revenge that wouldn't actually fix anything. 2 days until I had to choose between justice and humanity, and I still had no idea which one I was going to pick. Hashtag chunk 4. The drive home on December 23rd felt like driving toward a cliff. I kept thinking I could turn around, go back to campus, claim a sudden illness or academic emergency. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The folder was in my backpack, tucked between textbooks I hadn't opened in weeks. My parents' house looked exactly the same as it always did, the wreath on the front door, the light strung along the gutters, the pretense of perfection already in place. I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before getting out of the car. Emma was there when I walked in. Of course she was. She was in the living room helping my mom arrange garland on the mantelpiece, and when she saw me, her face did this complicated thing, a flash of genuine warmth followed by something more guarded. Like she was remembering that we weren't actually close, and she'd better not overshare the vulnerability she'd shown at the coffee shop. "Hey," she said, climbing down from the step stool. "You made it." "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded strangled. Traffic was okay. My mom hugged me, the kind of hug that felt obligatory. She was already distracted, mentally elsewhere the way she always was this time of year. My dad was in the other room watching some football game, and he called out a greeting without looking away from the screen. Normal. Everything was so aggressively normal. I took my bag upstairs to my old bedroom, which my parents had converted into some kind of guest room hybrid, still my space technically, but less and less with each visit. My childhood trophies were gone. My posters had been taken down. There was a perfectly made bed with a generic duvet, and I wanted to scream at the impersonal neutrality of it. I unpacked methodically, including the folder, which I tucked into the back of my closet behind some old boxes of books. My hands were shaking. This was actually happening. This was really, truly happening. Dinner that first night was salmon and asparagus and my mom's complicated rice pilaf that she stressed about for hours despite it being the same recipe she'd made 100 times. Emma complimented everything immediately and enthusiastically. My dad made his terrible jokes about the consistency of the rice. I sat there and moved food around my plate and tried not to think about the folder upstairs. "So," my mom said, turning to me with the kind of attention that felt performative, "how are your classes going?" "Fine," I said. "Finishing up strong." "That's good," she said, and then turned to Emma. "Emma, tell your dad about that group project you're doing." And just like that, I was invisible again. Emma launched into some animated story about her biology group, and I felt the old familiar sting of it. The way my mom's face lit up when she talked to Emma. The way my dad actually paused the game. After dinner, I went for a walk. I needed to get out of the house before I did something stupid like go get the folder and change everything. The neighborhood was quiet, decorated within an inch of its life. Every house looked like a Christmas card. I'd grown up here thinking this was normal, this level of curated perfection. It wasn't until I got to college that I realized how suffocating it all was. I was coming back down the street when I saw Emma sitting on the porch, wrapped in one of our mom's blankets despite the fact that it wasn't even that cold. "Going to ambush you with coffee was bold," I said, sitting down next to her, "but doing it twice in different contexts might be considered harassment." She laughed, actually laughed, which made me feel worse. "Fair. But I'm allowed to be on my own porch." We sat in silence for a minute. I could feel her looking at me, trying to figure out what to say. "I've been thinking about something," she said finally. "Something kind of fucked up." My entire body went tense. "Yeah. I think Mom and Dad are disappointed in me," she said. "Not like, openly. They'd never say it. But I can feel it, you know. Like I'm failing some invisible test." The folder upstairs felt like it was burning a hole in the ceiling. I couldn't speak. "I know they love me," she continued. "But I think it's because of who they think I am. Not who I actually am. And I'm starting to realize those might not be the same person anymore." "Emma," I started, but I didn't know how to finish that sentence. "You're doing something," she said, and it wasn't a question. "I don't know what it is, but you've been weird since Thanksgiving. And I think it has something to do with me." My heart was doing things that made it hard to breathe. "That's not," I tried. "I'm not mad," she said. "I'm just noticing. And I'm trying to figure out why my sibling, who I literally never see, suddenly seems like they're either going to hug me or punch me at any given moment." I stood up. I had to. If I sat there for one more second listening to her be vulnerable and honest, I was going to tell her everything. I was going to warn her. And then the whole plan would collapse and I'd have nothing. "I'm tired," I said. "Long drive." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "Okay. But when you're ready to talk about whatever this is, I'm actually here. Like, genuinely. Not because Mom and Dad expect me to be. But because you're my sibling, and I don't hate you." I went inside without responding, which was cruel, which was exactly what I was becoming. In my room, I sat on the edge of the guest bed and I didn't open the folder. I couldn't look at it right now. But I didn't delete it either. I just sat there in the dark with the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me like something physical. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. The family dinner was on Christmas Day. That was when I was supposed to do this. That was when everyone would be assembled, and I could present my evidence like I was revealing something noble instead of carefully orchestrated humiliation. Except now I was wondering if noble was even possible. Now I was wondering if there was any version of this that didn't just make everything worse for everyone, including me. I looked at my phone. 2:47 a.m. I had approximately 36 hours to figure out who I actually wanted to be. And I still had no idea. Hashtag chunk 5. Christmas Eve morning, I woke up to the smell of cinnamon rolls baking and the sound of my mom calling everyone downstairs. For a second, I forgot about the folder. For a second, I was just home for the holidays like a normal person. Then it all came rushing back, and my stomach twisted into knots. I dragged myself down to find my mom in full production mode, mixing ingredients, organizing the desserts she'd be bringing to the family dinner tomorrow, simultaneously wrapping presents she thought nobody could see. She was the kind of busy that made her simultaneously present and completely absent. She'd talk to you while doing 3 other things, and you'd never be quite sure if she'd actually heard a word you said. "Good morning," she said brightly, sliding a warm cinnamon roll onto a plate. "Emma's at her friend Jessica's house, they're doing some last-minute shopping. Your dad's in the garage doing who knows what. I need to finish the prime rib marinade, and then I thought maybe you and I could." She stopped, looking at me properly for maybe the first time since I'd gotten home. "Are you feeling okay?" "You look terrible." "Bad sleep," I lied. "Car ride was exhausting." "Well, eat something. You're too skinny." This was her automatic response to most things. In her mind, carbohydrates could solve approximately 70% of life's problems. I sat at the kitchen island and picked at the cinnamon roll while she moved around me with practiced efficiency. She was genuinely happy right now, in that focused way she got when she had a plan and could execute it. If I went through with this tomorrow, she wouldn't feel this way for a very long time. "Your father wants to do presents tonight instead of tomorrow morning," she said, not looking at me. "Everyone's too scattered this year. Emma has that thing on the 26th, and I don't know when you're heading back, and honestly, it'll be nice to just relax on Christmas Day without all the chaos." My blood ran cold. "What thing does Emma have on the 26th? My mom waved a hand vaguely. "Some kind of academic mentorship event at her school. Very exclusive, apparently. Your father's very proud." She finally looked at me. "She got selected from the entire student body. They only take like 15 students." I felt something crack inside my chest. An academic mentorship event. Emma, who according to the screenshots I had in my closet was failing at least 2 classes and had a D in organic chemistry. Emma, who'd been lying about her grades for months. Unless she wasn't lying about this one thing. Unless she'd somehow managed to actually get selected for something legitimate despite everything else falling apart. Unless she was actually trying, to fix things and I didn't even know it. That's great," I said, because my mom was still looking at me expectantly, and I needed to not seem like a person on the verge of a psychological break. She smiled and turned back to her marinade. "We're proud of her. She's really come into her own this year." I excused myself and went to the living room, where my dad was indeed in the garage but had been replaced by the football game he'd abandoned yesterday. I went upstairs instead, closed my bedroom door, and sat on the guest bed. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. I pulled up the screenshots of Emma's grades. December 4th. That was the last photo I'd taken, and it showed her failing grades as of the beginning of December. But academic mentorship events would be announced weeks in advance. She would have had to apply, be selected, all of that happening while she was supposedly doing so poorly. Maybe she'd gotten her act together. Maybe she'd been seeing a tutor, actually studying, trying to pull herself out of the hole she'd dug. Maybe the coffee meeting with me had been her way of reaching out, of admitting something was wrong, of trying to build a bridge before everything fell apart. And I was about to burn it down anyway. I opened my laptop and did something I hadn't let myself do in weeks. I went to Emma's Instagram. Her last post was from a week ago, a selfie from what looked like the library, with the caption, "Finals are done and I never want to see another exam again, lol." The comments were full of people being supportive, congratulating her on finishing the semester. I scrolled through her recent posts. There wasn't a single one that seemed off or suspicious. They were just normal Emma photos, her with friends, her at the coffee shop where we'd run into each other, her at some campus event. Nothing that contradicted the public image. But then, she wouldn't post evidence of her lies online, would she? That wasn't how this worked. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Unknown, hey, it's Emma. Got your number from mom's phone. She's making me come help with dinner prep and I'm dying. Can you save me? ****. I stared at the text for a full minute. Emma was asking me to save her. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. Me, what's the mission? Emma, she wants me to make the cheese board. Which is insane because I genuinely cannot arrange cheese in a way that looks intentional. You were always better at the aesthetic stuff. Come be my artistic director, ****. I was having trouble breathing. This was the part that was going to haunt me, I realized. Not the exposure itself, not the moment of revelation, but these moments right now. These moments where she was just my sister, being silly, asking for help with a cheese board, and I was sitting in a guest room holding proof of her failures like a loaded weapon. Me, be right down. I set my phone down and stared at the closet where the folder was hidden. 36 hours had become maybe 4, because apparently my family operated on some kind of accelerated schedule that didn't account for my moral deterioration. I thought about what Emma had said on the porch. ***, I think it's because of who they think I am. Not who I actually am, ***. What if I was about to do the same thing she was doing? What if I exposed her to make my parents see her reality, but I was really just forcing them to see the version of Emma I'd constructed from screenshots and failures, not the actual person downstairs making me come help with a cheese board? What if by trying to prove I was the better child, I just proved I was the worse one? I grabbed my phone and went downstairs before I could think about it any longer. #chunk6. The kitchen was chaos in the way only my mother could orchestrate. Ingredients covered every available surface, and she'd somehow managed to commandeer both the marble countertop and half the dining room table as a staging area for what she called the spread. Emma stood in the center of it all, holding a wheel of brie like it was a bomb that might detonate if she breathed on it. "It's just cheese," I said, coming up beside her. "You're overthinking it." "I'm not overthinking it. Mom is overthinking it, and now I have to execute her overthinking, which somehow makes it worse." Emma set the brie down carefully. "She wants it to look elegant but approachable." Those were her exact words. I don't even know what that means. Mom was in the dining room arranging flowers in a vase, half listening to us. "It means it should look nice but not intimidating," she called over. "People should feel like they can actually eat it, not just look at it." "See?" Emma pointed at Mom. Contradictory. Nice and not intimidating. That's like asking someone to be confident but humble. I almost laughed, then stopped myself. This was the problem. This was exactly the problem. Emma was funny and self-aware and capable of making me laugh even when I was actively planning to detonate her entire world. It would have been so much easier if she was just a villain. If she was arrogant and dismissive and deserved what was coming. Okay, new strategy, I said, pulling out a wooden board from the cabinet. We build it like we're telling a story. We're not arranging cheese. We're creating a narrative. Emma raised an eyebrow. Did you just quote some Pinterest thing to me? Maybe. But it works. Look. I started positioning the cheeses, creating clusters and negative space. We start with your anchor, that's your statement cheese. Something that says, I exist and I matter. Then you build around it. You add supporting characters, the jams, the nuts, the weird little pickled things mom loves. I was doing it without thinking. Leaning into the familiar rhythm of working with Emma, the way we used to do things before everything got so competitive, so weighted with resentment. Before I'd started keeping score of every slight. Supporting characters, Emma repeated softly. Is that what I am to you? A supporting character? I froze mid-arrangement, a handful of crackers in my hand. No. Sorry. That came out weird. Emma was looking at the board, not at me. I just meant. I know I haven't been a very good sister lately. Like, objectively. I've been kind of self-absorbed. Every muscle in my body tensed. This was it, the opening. The moment where if I was going to tell her, if I was going to give her any kind of warning or chance, I should do it. I could tell her right now that I knew everything. That I had proof. That tomorrow was going to be the worst day of her life unless she got ahead of it. Instead, I said, you've been stressed. That's not an excuse. She finally looked at me. She had dark circles under her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. I've been a brat about the car thing and about mom and dad paying more attention to me and all of it. And you've just been. I don't know, trying to handle your own stuff, and I made it harder. I'm sorry. The board blurred in front of me. You don't need to apologize, I said. Yeah, I kind of do. I was thinking about it, actually, before you came home. I was going to try to be better about it. Like, actually better, not just saying I'll be better and then falling into the same patterns. She started arranging the grapes in a careful arc, that's what the academic thing is about, actually. The mentorship program. Here it was. The moment where she was going to lie to me directly, and I was going to let her, because what else could I do? It's for people who are struggling but are actively working to turn it around, she continued. Like, they don't just select people who are naturally good at school. They select people who asked for help. Who admitted something was wrong and did something about it. I looked at her properly for the first time since I'd come downstairs. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing one of Dad's old sweatshirts that was too big for her. She looked tired and young and nothing like the golden child I'd been so angry at. How long have you been working on this? I asked carefully. Since like, October. Early October. She shrugged. I wasn't going to tell anyone because I didn't want to jinx it. And also because, you know, the timing was weird with everything going on with you and the tuition stuff. It felt like bragging. October. She'd been trying to fix things since October. Before she had coffee with me. Before any of this. That's really good, I said. Yeah, well. We'll see. It might not even help with anything. Like, one academic mentorship program doesn't fix the fact that I spent the first half of the semester being a disaster. She grabbed the cheese knife and started cutting some of the softer wheels into wedges. But I figure it's a start, right? Actually trying is better than just letting everything fall apart. Mom appeared in the doorway with a satisfied look on her face. This looks beautiful. You two work well together. The words landed between us like a bomb. Emma and I exchanged a glance, and I saw something in her eyes, a kind of fragile hope, like maybe she was thinking that we could work well together, that this moment could be the beginning of something instead of the end. We do, I said, and the words felt like the most dangerous thing I'd said in days. Mom disappeared back into the dining room, humming something Christmas adjacent. Emma turned back to the board and kept working, adding more details, creating something that actually did look elegant but approachable. Something that looked like effort and care. My phone was in my pocket. The folder was in my closet. Tomorrow night, or tonight if we were doing presents early, my parents were going to gather around and I was either going to destroy this or I was going to have to figure out how to live with not destroying it. And the worst part was that I no longer had any idea which one was the right choice. Hashtag chunk 7. The problem with moral clarity is that it only works when the world cooperates. When the person you're trying to expose remains conveniently villainous. When they don't suddenly become human again right before you're about to burn everything down. I helped Emma finish the cheese board, and we carried it into the dining room where Mom was setting out wine glasses like we were hosting a state dinner instead of a casual family gathering. Dad came in from the garage with his perpetually confused expression, holding a string of lights that probably belonged in the storage boxes from 1997. Should these even still work? He asked, testing them. Half the bulbs flickered on. Half stayed dark. Throw them out, Mom said without looking up. Get the new ones from the hall closet. He wandered off, and I stood there in the middle of our dining room, watching my family move through the familiar choreography of holiday preparation, and felt like I was watching it from behind glass. Like I was a ghost who could observe but not actually participate. Emma was texting someone, her phone lighting up her face in that way phones do. I could have taken the phone. Could have scrolled through it. I had the access, the knowledge of her passcode from a million casual moments. Instead, I just watched her smile at whatever was on the screen. Hey, can you grab the place cards from upstairs? Mom asked me. The ones from last year. I think they're in the linen closet. Yeah, okay. I headed upstairs, and as I was passing Emma's room, I noticed her laptop was open on her desk. The screen had gone dark, but it was still on. It would have taken 2 seconds to wake it up. 2 seconds to see what she'd been working on. I didn't do it. Instead, I got the place cards, ugly little cardstock things with calligraphy that Mom had done herself and somehow both loved and been embarrassed about for 12 months, and brought them back downstairs. We arranged them around the dining room table. The usual seating, Mom at the head, Dad at the other end, Emma and me on opposite sides. A configuration chosen years ago that no one had ever bothered to change. Around 4 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was Aunt Patricia and Uncle Ron, armed with a casserole and a kind of loud energy that made our house suddenly feel smaller. They hugged all of us with equal enthusiasm, the democratic kind of relatives who treat their nieces and nephews like beloved pets. "Look at you two," Aunt Patricia said, pulling back to examine Emma and me. "Getting so old. So tall. So accomplished." She said it like a question, which was the family's way of asking for a status update without directly asking. It was a loaded gun of a question. "Emma got into a mentorship program at school," Mom said quickly, before either of us could answer. "For students working on their academics. It's very selective." "That's wonderful." Uncle Ron boomed. "What about you?" He turned to me. "Still figuring out the college path." "Still in progress," I said, aware of how that sounded. How inadequate it sounded next to Emma's mentorship program. "She's got great options developing," Dad said, which was nice of him but also completely made up. Dad didn't know anything about my college options. He knew I needed help paying for them, and apparently that had been a deal-breaker. We moved through the dinner preparations, and I kept waiting for something to crack. For someone to ask too direct a question. For the moment where I'd have to actively lie or actively confess. But it didn't come. Instead, there was just the comfortable chaos of people who'd been together a long time, whose patterns were so entrenched they barely needed to think about them anymore. Around 7 p.m., we sat down to eat. The cheese board looked genuinely beautiful in the center of the table, like something from a magazine, but also like something that had been made by people who actually knew what they were doing. Not pretending. Not performing. Just doing. "Emma, this is gorgeous," Aunt Patricia said, gesturing at the board. "Did you do this?" "We did it together," Emma said, and glanced at me. "It was actually kind of fun. We made up this whole narrative thing about supporting characters." "Supporting characters?" Uncle Ron laughed. "In a cheese board? Like, each cheese tells a story," I explained, surprising myself. "You have your main character, the strong one that everything else relates to. And then the supporting cast. The ones that make the main character more interesting." Emma nodded. "Exactly. It's about context and relationships, Anne." "It's just cheese," Mom said fondly, but she was smiling. Though a very nice cheese arrangement, I'll admit. We ate, and the conversation moved through the safe channels it always did. School, work, relatives, local gossip. Aunt Patricia told a story about her neighbor's cat that somehow turned into a 20-minute anecdote about property disputes and zoning laws. Uncle Ron talked about his new golf clubs. Mom made her annual comment about how Christmas was arriving earlier every year. Dad fell asleep briefly in his chair before jerking awake and pretending he'd just been resting his eyes. Normal. It was all so aggressively, suffocatingly normal. And somewhere around 9 p.m., after we'd cleared the dishes and moved into the living room for what Mom called dessert and television, I realized that tomorrow was the day everything was supposed to change. That I'd been planning this for weeks. That the moment of reckoning was supposed to arrive and reset the entire equation of my family life. Except now I had 3 very clear problems. First, Emma was genuinely trying to fix things. Not performing, not pretending, actually working on herself in concrete ways. Second, my parents were being perfectly decent to me. Not overly generous, not overly attentive, but present and kind in the way they'd always been. The gap between how they treated Emma and how they treated me was still there, still visible if you looked for it, but it was smaller than I'd been making it in my head. And third, most dangerous of all, I was almost happy right now. Sitting in a chair that smelled like our house smelled, watching my family be exactly who they were, without the weight of secrets and revenge plans crushing everything in sight. Emma was curled up on the couch next to Aunt Patricia, halfway through a piece of cake. She caught me looking at her and smiled, just a casual, familial smile with no hidden meaning. No performance. I looked away and opened my phone. The folder was still there. All of it. The screenshots, the photos, the evidence of Emma's failures and deceptions. I could still do this. I could wait until tomorrow. I could wait until tonight. I could choose the moment and choose the outcome. But for the first time since October, I genuinely didn't know if I wanted to. #Chunk8. The folder sat in my phone like a loaded weapon I'd stopped carrying. I held the phone in my lap, screen dark, and felt the weight of it, not physical, but moral. The kind of weight that doesn't show up on a scale but settles in your chest anyway. Aunt Patricia was telling some story about a Christmas party from decades ago, before Emma and I were born. Uncle Ron was laughing, Mom was shaking her head, Dad was actually awake and engaged. Emma was watching the TV but also watching me, I realized. Not obviously. Just the way you keep an eye on someone you're thinking about. I could show her the folder right now. That would be the cruelest option. I could hand her the phone, make her see herself through my eyes, as a fraud, a liar, someone so desperate for approval that she'd built an entire false identity. I could do it publicly. I could do it privately. I could do it tomorrow morning or tonight or at literally any moment I chose. The fact that I had choices somehow made it worse. Around 11 p.m., Aunt Patricia and Uncle Ron headed to the guest room, both yawning like synchronized dogs. Mom went to bed. Dad followed. The house settled into that specific quiet it gets at night, the kind where you can hear the furnace running and the occasional creak of settling wood. Emma and I were alone in the living room. She was scrolling through her phone. I was pretending to look at mine. "Hey," she said quietly. "Can I ask you something?" Every muscle in my body tensed. This was it. This was the moment where she confessed, or apologized, or gave me the moral clarity I'd been desperately searching for. This was where she made it easy. "Yeah," I said. "Do you think I'm a good person?" It wasn't the question I expected. It was so nakedly vulnerable that for a moment I couldn't figure out how to respond. That's a weird question, I said finally. I know. But do you? I thought about the girl I'd seen in her text conversations with her study group, someone who helped others with their work, who asked for help herself, who didn't pretend to have everything figured out. I thought about how she'd immediately agreed to make the cheese board with me. I thought about the mentorship program Mom had mentioned, which I'd assumed was another lie until I realized it probably wasn't. It was probably her attempting to actually improve, actually get help, actually address the academic problems she'd created. I thought about the fact that I didn't actually know who Emma was. I had screenshots and photos and evidence of lies, but those were just data points. They weren't the same as knowing someone. I don't know, I said honestly. Do you think you're a good person? Emma set her phone down. In the glow from the TV, she looked younger than 19. She looked like the kid who used to follow me around when I was a teenager, who thought I was cool, who I'd been jealous of so thoroughly that I decided she was a villain instead of just a person. I used to, she said. Before I started lying about my grades, I thought I was pretty great. And then I realized I wasn't, and instead of fixing it, I just got better at lying about it. And I felt like shit about that, so I'd try to be perfect about other stuff to balance it out. Which obviously just made everything worse. She pulled her knees up to her chest. I got into that mentorship program because I finally decided I was tired of feeling like shit, she continued. It's been hard. They make me actually engage with the material instead of just memorizing test answers. But it's better. I'm actually learning. And it turns out I'm not as smart as I thought I was, but I'm smarter than my grades were showing. So that's something. I sat with that. With the fact that she'd been fixing things. With the fact that my plan had been built on a version of Emma that was already changing without my intervention. I also know you're mad at me, Emma said, still not looking at me. Like, I don't know the specifics, but I know you hate that Mom and Dad treat me differently. And you're right to be mad about that. It's not fair. I got lucky, and you got less lucky, and they've been weird about that. But I didn't actually do anything to make them be like that. I was just born, and I happened to be good at school, and they decided that was enough to make me special. You lied to them about your grades, I said. It came out harder than I meant it to. Emma winced. Yeah. I did. I was scared they'd stop thinking I was special if I wasn't actually perfect. Which is stupid because they should have. I mean, I was lying to them. But I was so desperate to stay in their good graces that I just made it worse. She finally looked at me. I'm not trying to excuse it, she said. I'm just trying to explain why I did it. Because I think maybe you thought I was this confident person who had everything figured out, and I wasn't. I was just someone who was terrified of losing something that wasn't even real. I opened my phone. Found the folder. I could have shown it to her. Could have said, I know. I have proof. I was going to use it to expose you. Could have watched her face crumble. Instead, I deleted it. Not the evidence, I kept screenshots on a cloud drive, because some part of me was still angry, still protective. But I deleted the specific folder I'd built for this purpose. The one labeled Proof with the time-stamped organization and a careful narrative I'd constructed. The deletion took 3 seconds. I watched the progress bar move across the screen and felt something release in my chest. I don't think you're a bad person, I told Emma. I think you're a person. Which means you're sometimes good and sometimes bad and mostly just trying to figure it out like the rest of us. That's very generous, Emma said, and there was something raw in her voice. Given that I've basically been handed everything and you've had to fight for it. Yeah, well, I said. That wasn't your fault either. We sat in silence for a while. The TV played some Christmas movie we weren't watching. Outside, it had started to snow, real snow, the kind that sticks, that turns everything soft and forgiving. I got accepted to state, I said, surprising myself. Full academic scholarship. I wasn't going to say anything because I wanted to. I don't know. I wanted to make a point. But I got in. They offered me a housing scholarship too, and work study, and the tuition is covered. Emma's face lit up. That's amazing. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was too busy planning something else, I said. And that was as close to the truth as I could get without actually saying it out loud. Mom and Dad found out at breakfast the next morning. They were surprised, then proud, then a little guilty that I hadn't mentioned it earlier. Aunt Patricia cried. Uncle Ron ordered a celebratory breakfast. Emma hugged me from the side, and I let her, because she deserved to, and because I was learning that sometimes the most honest revenge is simply living your own life well enough that you don't need anyone else to validate it. The folder stayed deleted. The evidence stayed private. And I went back to school in January with my scholarship secured and my family still intact. It wasn't the ending I'd written. But it was the one I actually needed.